Hola, bienvenidos a El Otro, Lado de la Verdad. Soy Denny Ochaita. Hoy nos acompaña Rachel Parent, un activista y fundador de Kids Right to Know, una organización que lucha por nuestros derechos en saber el contenido de nuestros alimentos. Rachel no habla español, pero le invité porque Rachel tiene una información muy importante que compartir con nosotros. Y se va a hacer la entrevista en inglés y también lo vamos a traducir en español. Entonces, Rachel Parent, thank you so much for being on my show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Great, thank you so much. Rachel, I have actually a few questions for you because what you're going to share with us is very important for our Latino community. A lot of people in our community don't understand what we're going to be discussing today. You founded a nonprofit organization called Kids Right to Know. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me what is Kids Right to Know and how Kids Right to Know became an organization like that?
Well, I started Kids Right to Know at the age of 12 years old, and originally I had to do a project for school, and I wasn't sure what to do it on. But I knew I wanted to do it on something that would impact as many people in the audience as possible. So I started researching topics such as deforestation, animal cruelty, poverty, GMOs, our food system. And when I started to really look into GMOs, genetically modified organisms, I found out that they connected to almost every other issue that I was passionate about, and that they affected our health and the environment. And at that point, I knew I had to do something. So I created a Twitter account to start off with, and then that grew to a website, and then that grew to the organization. And our goal as an organization is to gain mandatory GMO labeling. That way, every single person has the right to know what's in their food and has the right to choose what they're putting in their bodies.
For our viewers, and I'm sure there's a lot of viewers, what exactly is a GMO?
So a GMO is a genetically modified organism, and it's where they take DNA from one species and insert it into another to introduce a new trait. Now, this may seem really complicated, but in reality, there are only two real types of GMOs, and that's pesticide producing and herbicide resistant. So pesticide producing is basically where they insert a pesticide into the seed, so that way when the crop grows and a bug tries to eat it, its stomach will actually explode. And herbicide resistant is where they can spray thousands and thousands of pounds of herbicides onto these crops and it won't kill them.
Okay, so this is where they merge a vegetable, for example, and they put pesticide in it or make it a pesticide?
Yeah.
So are you telling me that when they do this, we're actually eating pesticide?
We are, and it goes into our system and it never truly leaves because we're continuously eating these foods.
Oh my goodness. Okay, and what crops are genetically modified to your knowledge?
Well, the main crops that we see are corn, canola, soy, and then derivatives of that, such as vegetable oil. Those are really big ones. Then we have cotton, so anything with really cotton grown in India is most likely genetically modified, and Hawaiian papaya and yellow squash and zucchini, as well as sugar beets. Those are the main ones that we see. In the US, potatoes and genetically modified apples were just introduced. So those are a couple new crops, as well as alfalfa in the US. In Canada, we have almost all of those now, except for potatoes.
Oh my goodness. Okay, and for example, you said they're pesticide producing and herbicides. What type of herbicides do they use on these our vegetables?
They use the main herbicide that they use for genetically modified crops is called Roundup.
Okay.
And the main ingredient is glyphosate. And the WHO actually came out recently and said that glyphosate is a probable carcinogen and is probably causing cancer in humans. Now, that's a really big issue because glyphosate has been in our food system for 20 plus years now. And it's not labeled and people don't know about it. And yet the number one killer, I'm not sure about in the US, but in Canada for young children is cancer right now. So the rates are exponential.
You know, and there are growing rates of cancer, and I often wonder myself, why is it that cancer rates are skyrocketing? I do teach a lot about food, and in fact, I did a show some while ago about certain foods that people should avoid, and what you're talking about right now are pretty much 95% of the foods I was talking about are genetically modified, which is pretty scary. And especially if, like you said, soy, right? And soy is one of the main ingredients in vegetable oil. In fact, it's the only ingredient in vegetable oil. And if you go out to eat somewhere and they fry the food, don't they normally use soy?
Oh yeah, they use soy, and corn oil is pretty common as well. And canola is one of the biggest oils that's used across Canada and the US because it's so cheap.
Okay, and it's no wonder why people don't start feeling well. Especially here in America, people tend to go out and eat a lot of fried foods, and yeah, it's pretty scary what you're telling me. And as far as our health, we've discussed that. But what about the environment? Any information on that?
Well, GMOs impact our environment a lot. It's been related to things like the dying off of our bees and butterflies, which is a huge, huge issue. 1 in 3 bites of food that we eat every day is actually pollinated by bees. And so without our bees, our food supply is going to be severely, severely impacted. It's also been related to things like contamination of soil and water. With GMOs comes the added use of pesticides and herbicides, and extra fertilizers, which then contaminates our soil and contaminates our water. And that water then has pesticides and herbicides, which we're drinking. So it impacts us a lot. It's also been related to things like new superweeds and superbugs. Because of the added pesticides and herbicides, weeds are actually becoming resistant to it as well as bugs. And then they have to use stronger chemicals in order to kill off these organisms. So really, really big issue with that, because the fact is that when they use these stronger pesticides and herbicides, for instance, in Canada, they wanted to bring forth 2,4-D resistant corn, and 2,4-D was the main ingredient in Agent Orange. So really huge problem there, as you can probably see.
We're going to come back in a few moments after these messages, Rachel, and we're going to discuss a little bit more about this. We're here with Rachel Parent, the founder of Kids Right to Know. We'll be back after these messages. Thank you so much. Hola, regresamos al otro lado de la verdad. We're here with Rachel Parent, founder of Kids Right to Know. Rachel, we were talking a little bit about the impact on the environment. Can you tell us a little more about what we were discussing, or you were telling us?
I was just saying, GMOs have a profound impact on our environment, and it's not only just based here in Canada and the US, but when we look globally how it impacts our environment, it's affecting things like our rainforest and deforestation of the Amazon, for instance. In the Amazon, they're cutting down rainforests at about 40 football fields per minute, and a lot of this is to plant genetically modified soy. So all of those environmental issues that I was previously talking about are then also impacting areas like the Amazon, which is then going towards factory farming. A lot of the genetically modified soy grown in the Amazon is then fed to cows, which are then slaughtered. And one of the number one causes of greenhouse gases, in fact, and climate change is due to factory farming. So it's a really big circle, and it all affects each other, and that's why we really need to watch what we eat, because every time we put food in our mouth, it impacts another part of the world, and it's not just about us, but it's about everybody else collectively.
So we have 2 things that we're discussing right now. We're talking about health issues and our environment, especially when it comes to our soil and water. Of course, that water gets renewed and we end up drinking it. Has there ever been any studies about the effects of glyphosate, for example?
For the effects of glyphosate, there's quite a few tests. I can get back to you more on those tests. For GMOs, there are many, many independent studies done from scientists from around the world proving that GMOs have many issues. And they've been related to things such as allergies, digestive disorders, organ damage, even things like tumors. And that's why fighting for labeling, although it may not seem like it impacts a lot, it has a really big reach because, for instance, if it's impacting children with allergies, how will parents be able to avoid these foods unless they're labeled?
That's true. That's very true. I actually saw a picture on the internet of this experiment that I believe Professor Cyril Lini did. on rats, and they were showing tumors, and they were saying that he did a 2-year study of these rats consuming GMO corn, for example. And for some reason, they discredited his findings, from what I read in the article. So it's very important that people, we always talk about in my community about reading, our ingredient list. I would like to see more information about what we are eating, because I think it's very important for us to know. They put everything else on the label, how much fat or how much sugar it has. I don't see why it would be a problem, but I take it that this is why you started this organization, because you want to get this label on products, correct?
Correct. And for myself personally, I grew up with allergies, and I decided to do an experiment with myself to see if cutting GMOs out would make a difference. And right away my allergies got better. So I know that it's impacting tons of children out there who could be leading healthier lives and being happier due to the food that they're eating. And some of these kids grew up only eating GMOs because they were introduced in 1996.
Mm-hmm. And that could have a very long-term effect, and I think that's something that I'd be interested in looking into a little bit more. I think our community needs to know a little more about this. Especially if there are no food labels, at least we know the types of foods that contain GMOs, so that way we can make our choices, because we all deserve to make that choice. And obviously you definitely believe that, because you started a foundation or an organization like that. 90% here in America, 90% of the people here in America want to have their food labeled. They want to know if it's genetically modified. In Canada, how is it over there?
It's basically the same, around 90%.
Around 90%.
And poll after poll continuously shows that.
Okay, meanwhile, we have our representatives, of course, people in our government that are trying to fix that, so our products are being labeled. What I don't understand is probably something that, you may not be able to answer me, but there's 64 countries around the globe that have already been labeling these GMO products on every single product that they sell. And I just question, why is it that in the United States and Canada are a little bit slow in doing something like that, especially when they already label certain items that should be labeled. I see it as a common sense thing to do.
It is, but they don't do it a lot of the time because there's a lot of corporate infiltration.
I see. Well, a lot of people are waking up to that fact about this corporate infiltration, like you said. Well, I want to ask you this. Have you seen other changes in other people? Like perhaps you have friends that you've spoken to about GMOs. Have they told you about any changes that you may have had?
There's been tons, and we get thousands of letters from around the world telling us that, people cut out GMOs from their diets after finding out about the work that we've done. And they got better, and they're so much happier. And I think that's what continues to push me forward to do more, knowing that even helping one person truly is an achievement.
Yes, I think it's very important, especially letting the word out that what they can do to make a change. In a moment, Rachel, we're going to go to commercial break, and we're going to discuss a little bit more about your movement and how far it's come and what else we can do to help each other out with this whole GMO situation. We'll be back in a few moments after these commercial breaks. Thank you. Hi, we're back. We're here with Rachel Parent, founder and activist of Kids Right to Know. Rachel, can you tell us a little bit about, you spoke to us about how you started this organization. Please tell us, what can we do to get the word out to inform other people? What would you recommend?
What everybody needs to do is get out there and tell every single person you know. I think that's so key, because in reality, the reason this is still an issue is the fact that there's so little awareness within our communities. The second thing you can do is vote with your dollar. This is so important. Avoid anything containing corn, canola, soy, vegetable oil. High fructose corn syrup is a big one, especially in the US. And it's related to things such as obesity and diabetes, so highly suggest you avoid that. And other crops such as Hawaiian papaya and yellow squash and zucchini. I just hope that everybody remembers that every bite you take impacts the world in some way or another. And every time you wake up, you have the opportunity to change the world by voting with your dollar or to destroy it in some way. And I think all of our goals should be to, as Stephen Rupert said, leave the earth better than you found it. Rupert Stevens, sorry. So I think all of our goals should always be to make the world a better place and to leave future generations with a world which they can live in and be happy with. So collectively, we all have to work together towards that.
Definitely. And let me ask you, how old were you again when you first began this organization?
I was 12.
You were 12 years old. And let me tell you something. I'm excited to even have you here. One, for many reasons. Obviously, because you're so informed on this whole GMO situation. You can provide valuable information for the Latino community here, because when I talk to Latinos around my community, because I do have certain talks, along with a doctor friend of mine, they have no idea what GMO is. And I could only do so many talks in order to be able to get the word out, because so many people end up getting sick. But what really inspires me and motivates me a little more is when I see someone like yourself, of course, of your age. Most people will look at that as a limitation. I personally don't. But at that very moment, like when you see someone of your age begin something so large, it also gives them the permission to be able to do something for themselves to help out the rest of us, because in reality, we're all connected. Mm-hmm. What challenges have you had, like during this whole program? Any challenges, perhaps, in bringing out your message? Anything like that?
There's lots of challenges. Funding as an organization is definitely one of our biggest challenges. We've had struggles with that since the beginning.
You do need money. You do need money to do this.
Yeah, and another thing is, of course, this is a touchy topic because scientists, some say that it is safe. A lot of the scientists that do are paid for by corporations, but regardless, we then get backlash for doing the work that we do. But, I think that that's just one challenge to overcome, and it makes you a stronger, better person in the end. So that's one of the challenges that we faced. And then getting media can be tough sometimes, especially, when you have big events happening. A lot of the times, broadcasters are sponsored by companies because they advertise their foods.
Yes.
So sometimes they don't want to broadcast the stuff that we have to say. But it hasn't been all too bad. In Canada, we've gotten quite a bit, so that's the bright side.
Yes, definitely. But Rachel, you've done a lot of great work, and I'm inspired and motivated to do a little more talking about this. I really appreciate you getting on this show, simply because, it's important. Our Latino community, they don't know too much about this, and having you on is a big deal. I believe as long as even if they don't label, but as long as we let the word out that soy, canola, and corn, you said the major ones to stay away from if you want to maintain healthy, because they are genetically modified. I have that picture of the rats. It's a scary picture, especially, it was a 2-year study to where they fed these rats nothing but corn, and then they fed it the herbicide, and as a result, they ended up with these tumors. I don't want to see that in my community, not just my community, in all humans, because like I said, if something happens to you or me, we all pay the price, especially with our environment and things of that nature. Rachel, how can we help you further advance your cause? What would you recommend we do to help you? Can we donate? Can we follow you?
That'd be great. If you feel inclined to donate, that would be amazing. Even writing us a letter of support, telling your community, starting a petition, that's always incredible. Start a petition to label GMOs. You can find them on the internet as well, and bring them to your government and send letters to them, because you know what? If enough consumers go out there and say that they want the right to know, they want transparency, the government will listen to them. So you got to get out there, you got to get active, because that's the most important thing. I think in Canada and the US, we've been passive for way too long. And people in Europe, they have GMO labeling because they fought for it. So it's our time to get out there.
Okay, Rachel. Listen, Rachel, I want to thank you so much. How can we get a hold of you?
You can get a hold of me. You can find me on Twitter, which is @Rachel'sNews.
Okay.
You can go to my website. You can find my contact information there. And one last thing I wanted to add was when you're voting this year, make sure you're voting for somebody who has integrity and who wants to make the world a better place. The one person that I know of that really has that goal in mind is Bernie Sanders. And
I agree.
Believe that he would be an incredible president. Of course, I don't know as much about your politics as you guys do, but just make sure you're voting for someone with integrity and who wants to leave the world a better place.
Thank you very much, Rachel. You know what? I completely agree because I've done my research and he is the only one. But thank you for joining us, Rachel. Everything you've taught us, I mean, we can each take responsibility and look further into what you're discussing with us about the GMOs, and we can make those changes, and together we could put a great message out and let everybody know. I want to thank you profusely. You have major girl power, and so thank you for everything you do. And gracias por acompañarnos en el otro lado de la verdad. Aquí nos ofreció Rachel Parent mucha información muy importante. Aquí en este programa vamos a aprender muchas cosas interesantes y buenas que le puede beneficiar a usted y su familia. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos. Soy Denny Ochaita. Gracias.